Hello, I'm a fraudster, and I'm going to scare the living daylights out of more than 1 in 5 of you. Your online password is...
Adding numbers, capitals, and symbols makes your password stronger.
Are the titles of your books, The Abolition of Britain and The Abolition of Liberty, in any way a sort of homage or a nod of the head to The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay, good. So, what is it about his writing that influenced you in that way?
I don't know, really. I mean, when I was deciding on it, I recently read Abolition of Man, and it just came into my mind. There's nothing more complex than that.
Do you find his observations and predictions to be quite true? Do you think the way he described the world and its sort of apparatus?
Oh, I don't want to get caught in a discussion about a book I haven't read.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. We can move along then. I was just curious about the titles.
Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, it had a certain rhythm to it, and that was in any object of it. Though I found quite soon after deciding on the title that a lot of people have trouble with the word abolition.
Right.
They can't cope with it. This establishment. It's very strange. It has no rhythm for them or any meaning.
Why do you think that is?
Sorry?
Why do you think that is?
I've no idea. I mean, I think in general the ability of people more complex has been in decline for probably the grammar school. I don't speak in what you might call elaborate anymore. It's much more simple and much more Americanized. I don't think people are interested to subordinate clauses, words with more than 2 syllables in part B. And I noticed just reading Paul Theroux's return to his original great rail czar, and in India, he notes how very much more elaborate and multisyllabic the English spoken by Indians than the spoken by English people. And I think that's true. There are words that people don't use anymore, but I think I was quite surprised that abolition was one of them. But it did seem to give people trouble. I just live I was in for a different world, and I live now in a country where, as I do, it as pompous and over I say, because form sentences and subordinate try and get my sentence end. People regard that as itself almost, I won't say offensive, but and possibly overbearing, and maybe language, the decline of language is very significant and very rapid. I found that people, when I was at the book shops, don't do that, and was being to one shop or another trying to get to order it, that quite often they cope with the title.
So when you wrote a book like The Abolition of Britain back in the late 90s,
there is no book like The Abolition of Britain. It is unique.
What sort of feedback did you initially get when you made these claims that you did?
When I wrote it,
yeah.
feedback I initially got was public refused to touch it with a 40-foot pole, and no one would publish it. Somebody who I had spoken to was a parent of a school where one of my children worked for a British. So when I was writing a book, let him know what it was about. I sent it and sample chapter to him, and he didn't respond for weeks, and then he sent me a letter which appeared to be dictated by somebody else, saying it was shocking that I consider writing such a book, and that he had nothing to do with it. Everybody turned it down. I then went to an who had worked for a left-wing friend of mine, and he refused anything to do with promoting it. Though it's quite amusing. A few years later, he wrote to me offering my agent an offer I turned down. But I find a really good agent in the shape of a wonderful man called David Miller. That's no longer with us. And David said, "Oh, I'll get it published for you. This won't be a difficulty." And some months I came back. I'm so sorry, but I've never had such trouble getting a book published in my life. I really never had so much difficulty. People didn't want it, whether it was me or what I'm saying, or a combination of the two, I don't know. But it hadn't been picking it up, then that would have been that. It would never have been published. If I'd have published it myself, it would have been a complete waste of time. Isn't anything like so much a waste of time now.
What do you think changed then in the years between the first and second editions, where by the second edition it was people were a lot more willing to publish it? Is it just a money thing, or do you think the
nothing? They were. What changed was when it was published, sold.
Right.
That's all the game. That it went it down in the book. They thought that no one would be.
One of the targets of the Abolition of Britain is, of course, Tony Blair, someone who's recently been given a knighthood in the New Year Honours. To go from someone who not only waged this, catastrophic war in the Middle East, and also caused a lot of damage to the UK, how do you think he got away with it, so to speak, to the point
why shouldn't he get away with it? He embodied the spirit of the age. That's why the New Labour project hired him. He looked like it, and he sounds dandy, I don't think, but he's a perfect front man for it.
Right.
So why not? People go on and on about it. I was when he was the Queen. It wasn't the New Year's Honours. The Queen personally who awarded him the order. Was joined in the Iraq War. It was a very bad thing, but it wasn't by any means the only bad thing that he'd done. In fact, which people don't, because a lot of people like them. The transformation of Britain, which what it was in other parts of the world, it was and remains and is still carrying on and has been adopted by the Conservative Party.
No, yeah, absolutely.
So, what would be surprising about the only thing was these rumours that the Queen was holding Arthur for becoming like some behaviour. Wondered whether that was true or not. And gave it to him, and I think we could all say, well, that obviously wasn't true. There was some other reason why it was too late.
So, one thing that I find quite interesting to look at is life before Blair, because I was born in the summer of '96, so I've never. Well, I was born in sort of the tail end of Major. So I and most of my contemporaries haven't really known anything other than Blairite and post-Blairite Britain. So
you wouldn't like what went before, because it was the tail end of something in serious decline. It had no spirit, or it wasn't that Blair on some powerful force or overthrew a confidence. Because what he found at wreck with no belief, no kick or pop door down, moved in and changed everything. But it had been decaying for years, And there was nothing, as I keep saying to people, there was nothing remotely conservative about the Thatcher era. She was a radical liberal. And but the combination of her and particularly Harold Wilson, her other major post-war predecessor, really, in these terms, in terms of destroying the fabric, structure, and nature of the country as it had been, was huge. So there wasn't all that much left for them to do as they kicked the door down and come in and establish the new society which they wanted.
So
nobody fought them. Nobody even understood what it was they were doing. It was but you wouldn't if you'd been fully conscious as an adult in the years before you were born, you wouldn't have found a society enormously desirable or creditable, or one you could get nostalgic about.
Right.
It was just a mess where everybody, the best lacked all conviction, and nobody really believed in anything.
There's even bits of that sort of thinking in Parade's End by Maddox Ford, where he's talking about the swindlers and the con men, and that was written in the 20s.
Well, lucky you, I couldn't. Obviously, some people find these things easier than I do.
So, what would you say then is the origin of this decline? Then, because you mentioned the Thatcher years and New Labour.
Well, again, I mean, I must have said this 3 million times. Does nobody want to ask me any other questions? Protestant Christianity collapsed. And it was already weak, but it collapsed totally during the First World War. After that, there was a gigantic vacuum into which other ideas rushed. I can't say how many times I've said this. This is my explanation.
Did it collapse on like a moral level, or did the people carrying it
collapse? It was everything.
It was
this was the basic belief on which people live their lives. It was at the back of philosophy, literature, history, the ordering of society, law and criminal justice and morality, and then it was gone. If you smash the roof tree out of a house, then the roof falls down.
Right. Yeah. And do you still believe that there's no way of clawing that back? Is it just gone now?
Well, I see how you would. I mean, it's not. It takes it takes centuries to build up a moral, political, legal, and cultural structure of that kind. And it can be overthrown in a week. Right. In this case, the first week of August 1914.
One thing that sort of is, I suppose not necessarily from you, but from the people who platform you say that you believe that Britain is a dying society. Is it still dying to you, or is it dead?
Well, I know. Yeah, what do you think? Look at the figures. Look at everything. Look at the levels. Look at the levels of literacy. Look at the state of the schools. Look at the state of the streets. Look at the state of law enforcement and criminal justice. Look at the nature of government. Look at the inability of anybody to stand up to the recent mass panic. And then fundamentally look at the economic figures, the indebtedness, private and public, the levels of taxation, the expanding inflation. Look at the national, the state of the country in relation to other nations, its ability to defend itself and to exert its will through diplomacy. Look at all these things. Every single one of them is a measure of decline. All the gauges are deep in the red patch. You'd have to be crazy not to think there's something wrong.
Yeah. I'm not speaking that. The question is more: is Britain as a society dying or dead?
Well, I mean, it's supposed to. In my view, dead. I spent quite a lot of time, and this was the great illusion that I had in the early years of the 21st century, thinking that maybe I could interest some people in reversing this, and I found that nobody could give a damn. They were much more interested in party loyalty and tribal joy than they were in saving the country, and that's it. There's only a limited amount of energy I'm prepared to give up on persuading people to do something they don't want to do. If people don't want to save the country, then it won't be saved, will it?
Does that leave you then with any faith left in, say, democracy?
I have no faith in democracy.
That's
a bizarre thing to have any faith in. I mean, democracy is a weird political system, it only exists sporadically in a very small number of jurisdictions and tends not to work very well where it has. Liberty I'm more concerned with, but this isn't a political question anymore anyway. There is no political force desiring a conservative counter-revolution. And if people don't want a conservative counter-revolution, I absolutely promise you they won't get one. People wanted a radical counter-revolution, a radical revolution throughout the 20th century, and they've got it now. Like I say, I hope they like it. I personally don't.
Well, what do you make of then of the events of 2016 then as some sort of counter-revolution, were they?
2016? What happened in 2016?
Well, the referendum, Trump, some sort of populist wave on the continent.
I mean, why should one rejoice at the elevation? I mean, this is what happens in universal suffrage democracy. Yahoos and screamers and frightening people are lifted up to prominence, such as Mr. Trump. And I've many times written, this is what I tried to warn my left-wing friends, such as they were, against over many years. I remember doing it in Washington, D.C. back in, 1993, when I was living there, so sitting at some liberal dining table and saying to my next-door neighbour, look, I know you despise conservatives like me, but if you carry on despising us and ignoring us, then what you're also ignoring is millions of people who are being treated in a way which will eventually make them turn to people far worse than me. I said, embrace what I say while you can, or you'll get that. I didn't name Donald Trump because at that stage I don't think either of us could have believed that such a person could have become president of the United States. But that's what I meant. Why would I rejoice at the elevation of a Yahoo to the Chief Magistracy of the United States? And I hate referendums. Referendums are the tools of demagogues. I'm completely against them. Nothing that comes out of them will be good. And I took no part in it. Again, I say this for perhaps the 40 millionth time. I took no part in it. I didn't vote in it. I didn't want it. And I don't rejoice at the outcome of it. It's been catastrophic in many ways, not least for the civilized cause of leaving the European Union in a sensible way, which I used to support.
I suppose also it defibrillated the Tory party in a way. It gave them, another.
Well, it was the referendum, just as the 1975 referendum was a device cooked up by Harold Wilson to save the Labour Party. The 2016 one was a device cooked up by David Cameron to try and save the Tory party. And lo, that's what it did. But neither of them saved the nation, the country. Both of them gravely damaged the nation. But this is the problem with people in this country. When major political decisions come around, they become partisan and tribal instead of thoughtful. That's why general elections are such a waste of time for anybody of any intelligence or thought. Best thing to do during was go on holiday. I mean, nobody says anything intelligent or does anything intelligent, and nothing that results from it is good.
Do you think in a way that's kind of what died in the Second World War was
Second World War.
Sorry, first. Because one thing I can't remember where I read about it, but it was the ramifications of the again, this may be a terrible point, but the decline of the aristocracy post First World War, where
I couldn't give a tinker's damn about the aristocracy.
Fair enough. But okay, so back onto the point of living in a dead society. I suppose you'd be an interesting person to talk about this because you witnessed the death of a civilization in the Soviet Union. You witnessed the last days.
Well, it was the death of something. Whether you could fairly call it a civilization is another matter. But yes,
the death of a geopolitical entity, then to be as
of an empire for sure. Yeah, okay.
So was there anything in those last days of the Soviet Union that you now recognise in Britain?
Oh, lots, yes, because the Soviet Union was possessed of several illusions about itself. Everything was with people. Most intelligent people didn't believe this anymore, but quite a lot of stupid ones did. Everything that the Soviets had done was the best in the world. Sami lучший в мире, the phrase that people would say, and the intelligent people would use it with a laugh in their voice, but the official spokesman would actually genuinely claim. And then also the other thing was, of course, the complete obsession with the Second World War, which I have to say was more justifiable in the Soviet Union here because they had in fact lost million upon millions of people and had their countries smashed up by an invader to an extent which we can't even begin to imagine. But even so, by 1990, when I arrived there, this is 45 years after it ended, it couldn't really be used much longer as a justification or legitimization of the Soviet state. But there was a huge national mythology of television programs and films and books and everything else, which was, and great big parades, which was based upon that. And it resembled, to some extent, the similar sort of national religion of the finest hour in this country, which we still cling to. And there was a finest hour, but it wasn't fine for precisely the reasons that we think that it was fine.
Was it a sort of? I mean, I know you've written about the sort of the delusions around delusions of grandeur around our role in the Second World War, but I mean, we were ultimately on the winning side. But was it?
We were on the winning side of some. We started one war which we then lost.
Right.
We in France lost it. The French were invaded and occupied, and we were not because of the Channel. And then then the war was taken over by the United States and the Soviet Union, and they won it, and we were on the winning side, but we didn't win it.
Was it for us then I suppose a Pyrrhic victory in that we came out of the war?
Totally, yes. The First World War was the first of our two great Pyrrhic victories. You could have an illusion at the end of the First World War because we expanded our actual imperial territory. It looked as if we'd won, but all the previous wars, going to the 7 Years' War and all the rest of it, the great wars of the 18th and 19th century, by which we expanded our power and became a major wealthy trading and maritime nation. Those wars, every one of them ended with us, including the Napoleonic War, which nearly bankrupted us, but we came out of it richer and more powerful than we had been when we started. In 1918, we came out totally indebted, having been a creditor nation, with much of our foreign investment gone and our trade supplanted and our naval supremacy very much on its way out. And after 1945, we were more or less bankrupt. And this is J.G. Ballard's point about living in immediate post-war Britain, which I can't remember because I was born in 1951, was that it was like living in a defeated country, not in a victorious one. Rationing, shortages, it's a grey feeling of everything having been stripped, the country more or less at the mercy of American whims, rather than our own. It wasn't when you win a war, generally you end more powerful and more wealthy than you were when you started. We fought two major wars in the 20th century, both of which made us weaker and poorer than we were before. It's a very odd way for a country to behave, in my view.
Yeah,
and then to boast a lot about it afterwards. A lot of the boasting was probably because of the complete lack of material advantage. People thought, well, there must have been something good about it. Of course, there was. I mean, not surrendering to Hitler after Dunkirk was a very good thing. It would have been catastrophic for us to have done so. But the question still needs to be asked: why were we one of the world's great empires, one of the world's great naval and powers and economic powers? Why were we at the feet of Nazi Germany in the summer of 1940? Why on earth were we in this appalling position?
Yeah,
because of the most incredible diplomatic incompetence by the leaders of the country in the previous 5 years, particularly in the previous two.
And then from 1945, we've been essentially an American satellite state.
Well, but much earlier than 1945. I mean, the great so-called Atlantic Charter Conference between Roosevelt and Churchill at Sentient Bay in, what was it, 1941, before the US came into the war, the terms of the relationship between us were pretty clearly defined from then on, that we were subservient and that the war that we were fighting was, in many cases, for objectives which would damage us.
So
it's all in my book, the Phony Victory. It's not, which is not a work of original research. It simply tots up all the things that happened and puts them in one place for a change. But there it is. It's I can't get many people to read it, but I do hope that I will get some people to read it eventually.
I do own it. I need to get onto that. But
yeah, well, there's this great jump. First of all, jump number one is to get people to buy the book. Jump number 2, which is often much bigger, is to get people then to open it. Jump number 3, which is almost impossible to ask them, is to get them to read it to the end.
Yeah, I have a terrible habit.
I think I would guess that probably no one's ever done the research on this. I get probably something the reason 90% of books sold never get read.
Well, I have a terrible habit of buying books faster than I can read them. Yes. I want to move along a little bit to your relationship with various political parties. So you left the Labour Party because you said it would be unethical to support a party while being a journalist.
Well, I said that at the time because it was part of the truth. I had just become a political reporter for my then newspaper, and I thought that it would be very difficult for me to do that, honestly, if I carried a party card. But I have to say, I was sick and tired of the Labour Party by then.
Right.
I belonged to the Hampstead constituency Labour Party, which is one of the North London parties most penetrated by what I would call the modern left. Ken Livingstone was a member of that party, and his influence was strong. The things that I was very much thought that a serious social democratic party should be on one side on, such as the Irish Republican terror or nuclear disarmament, were sides on which most of my fellow members in the Hampstead CLP seemed to take a different view. I used to get called to order during my speeches because I was being heckled. Comrade Hitchens, the chairman, would say, "Stop provoking the other comrades." She did not say to the other comrades, "Stop heckling Comrade Hitchens." And you could see from this which way the wind was blowing, and you could bring things to a vote, and you could stand up against it, but it was plain there was nothing to be done. The party was in the hands of a more or less Trotskyist left, of the sort that I'd abandoned some time before.
Right. So, with all that said, you then joined the Tory party in '97.
Well, you said then. There are something in the region of. Let me see. I left the International Socialists in 1975. I actually wrote a letter of resignation, which I didn't keep a copy of. I used to rely on MI5s to do that sort of thing, but they'd probably thrown it away too. And then I joined the Labour Party, I suppose it would have been 77, 78, when I lived in northwest London. Left it around about 84. I joined the Conservative Party in 98, I think, because I thought I'd seen that. You remember the Great Petrol Revolt? Possibly you don't. I thought unconstitutional revolt against the government was both dangerous and wrong, and also unlikely to be effective. There ought to be, I thought, some sort of constitutional resistance to Blairism. But within a very short time, I realised that the Conservative Party is not a political party. There isn't anything that you can do as an individual member to influence policy or the choice of leader. These things, all you're expected to do is to raise money, basically. And that's your only purpose in life. And it's a completely top-down organisation. And I eventually obtained a copy of the Constitution and confirmed. It was very hard to do, by the way, and confirmed that this suspicion of mine that there was nothing of that kind to be done. And so, not long afterwards, I decided to give that a rest because it wasn't ever going to be. And then, of course, there was it was quite clear what the Conservative Party was doing after certain events during William Hague's leadership. What the Conservative Party was doing was accommodating itself to New Labour anyway. So, what was the point in belonging to a Conservative Party that was Blairite?
And that hasn't gone away, has it, since then?
It's intensified.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. We can move along there, and I want to talk about grammar schools because I live in a town where that still has them. So there's 4 in my town. Well, there's 2, but they're split into boys and girls schools. So I didn't realise until I went to university that they weren't really a thing elsewhere in the country. So why was it that they were dismantled? Was it a sort of misguided sense of egalitarianism, or was it something more?
Basically, it is an egalitarian project. Yes, the people, the first person to put forward the idea of comprehensive schools in this country, modelled on American high schools, in fact, was a man called Graham Savage, who believed it would be more democratic. The idealistic left, particularly in the teachers' unions, much of it, I have to say, how shall I say, influenced by communist thinking, but believe that that separate schools for the academically, I won't say gifted because it's not a term I use, for the academically more equipped, were in some ways an affront to the equal society they wished to create. They wanted common schools where everybody went. Now, this plainly has failed. I mean, although we have comprehensive schools, they're not common schools where everybody goes. They're governed by a pretty rigid system of selection by wealth, which is done by and large geographically by catchment area. And so it's been a complete failure. And one of the fascinating things about the left is that they don't admit that it has failed.
Yeah. It seems like with every sort of grandiose egalitarian scheme, seems like it was just sort of, to not sound brutal, but a race to the bottom, really.
Well, that's a different question. The fascinating point here is that this is a policy pursued by the Labour Party, which principally damaged its own voters, and which they persist with right. Growing enthusiasm. The worse the results get. And you have to ask yourself, and I still struggle to find an answer. You have to ask yourself why such a thing goes on. My own view is that the idealists who really desired this feel that it's the first step in an uncompleted revolution. They want to create a comprehensive society in which comprehensive schools will finally come into their own. And they will always argue when the comprehensive schools are shown to be educationally catastrophic that they will claim this is because the country is not comprehensive enough.
Well, I mean, also the architects of this are sort of detached from the consequences of what they've done, right? Because
that's always been the case. Yeah. You can assume that in all egalitarian projects that the actual egalitarians themselves will find ways around the provisions of their own rules, and that was one of the things which was almost comically evident in communist elite. Then you lived much better than if you were among the common people. But when people read Animal Farm, I find it's quite funny, and when they see that when the slogan "all animals are equal" is adjusted to read "but some are more equal than others." They misunderstand it. What that means is that some are actually indeed more equal than others. That is to say, the ones who are more equal than others are the ones who will suffer. That's what it means. But people don't get that. They think equality is the thing which you should desire, and the animals who are more equal than others will be the more fortunate. That's the opposite of what it means.
Right.
But again, I get a lot of people think they've read Animal Farm, just as a lot of people think they've read 1984 and they haven't. So I'm always slightly worried about quoting from these works in case people don't have the foggiest idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I do try to avoid Orwell comparisons because I think they're just a bit sort of tired at this point. But I mean, this is a good caveat.
No, they would be tired, perhaps, but my impression is very strongly that people think they've read his major works, but they haven't.
Right. This is a good caveat, because we haven't got long left, but I would like to end on this general area, which is Orwell's final prediction was that the future would be a boot stamping on a human face forever. I mean, how close are we to that point with what's happening?
Oh, Miles, he was completely wrong about that.
Okay.
He was much righter than I thought he was about the levels of surveillance which were possible. The technology for real 1984 type surveillance has hugely intensified and reached something close to perfection in the past 5 or 6 years, really, and that has come alarmingly true in a way which I never thought that it would. But the predictions made by Aldous Huxley about people learning to love their own servitude were much closer. There's no need for all this force. You don't need to kick and bludgeon people into being slaves. You can drug them and soothe them and seduce them into it with electronics and narcotics. And that's what we're doing.
that's where the two almost kind of meet in a way, where you have the
Well, they don't.
the
They diverge hugely, and the thing about Brave New World is that really there is no resistance.
right.
A tiny few eccentrics don't like it, and they're offered the chance of going and living in the Falkland Islands. But everybody else is having a great deal of fun. Why not take the Soma? 4 grams give you a sort of holiday on the moon. There it is. The thing about Soma, the mistaken thing about Soma in Brave New World is that it's harmless. Whereas there is, in fact, a drug of that kind is never harmless, and it can't by its nature be, because you can't distort people's idea of what reality is without doing them damage. But it was a clever prediction by Huxley, and here's an interesting thing: the initial very successful campaign, which began the long struggle for marijuana legalization in this country, was called Soma. Those who launched that campaign, particularly a very clever guy called Steve Abrams, who I used to talk to a bit about it, back in the 60s, knew exactly what it was that they were doing.
Interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is, and it is alarming because you have this, very sophisticated, very ubiquitous surveillance state, but it's a lot of it comes through smartphones. Which, if you watch anyone my age, and you see the level of casual addiction to the device,
well, this was in Huxley's preface to the 48, I think, edition of Brave New World, where he went back on it. He said, "This is what I was trying to warn against: that people would love their own servitude."
Does it scare you to see what's happened to otherwise regular people in the last couple of years?
No.
Does it not surprise?
I'm fundamentally unworried because I don't care about it anymore. I found I was making myself unhappy by worrying about it. By thinking that I might alter it or prevent it. I'll take up particular cases, whether it be the false accusations against Bishop George Bell, or the attempt to legalize marijuana, or various other things, where I think that just possibly you can still marshal our forces to do a little small individual good. But in general political terms, the cause is totally lost. And there's no point in making yourself unhappy trying to fight against it. It's draining the Atlantic with a teaspoon would be easy compared with undoing the Blairite revolution.
I mean, it may not scare you. Does it surprise you still? No,
I'm not. It's almost impossible to surprise me. That's one of my problems as a journalist. What journalists are supposed to do is to rush into the room holding something, saying, "Look at this terrifying, shocking thing," and make people drop their breakfast when they open the newspaper. But I find it harder and harder to do this because I'm just not surprised or shocked anymore. Everything seems usual to me. It undermines my ability to be a proper journalist. I just am not surprised anymore.
Do you think there are any parallels between what's happening today and the regimes of the last century, or are the conditions of modernity so that it's unlike any other form of tyranny?
Well, there are parallels. What this is fundamentally is a revival of the end of the 18th century. We've gone back to the social and moral and educational and religious radicalism of the French revolutionaries, and finally dropped the great burden from the point of view of revolutionaries, the great burden of the Bolshevik revolution in the Soviet Union, which hung around the neck of radicals for so long. So that's not new at all. This is a total collapse of interest in the economic side of revolution, and the return to worrying about, say, social, moral, and religious questions is going back to something much older. But the other thing is, revolutionaries learn. They don't just go through all these mistakes and rebuffs and failures and think, "Oh well, we were wrong." They think, "Oh well, in that case, we must redesign the project." And after 1968, in the East and Western Europe, they did redesign the project into something which can loosely be described as Eurocommunism, which is to say the cultural, moral, social, educational, and sexual revolutions plural, if you like, in which we're all now engaged and which have been immensely successful on their own terms. And these things have happened, and we live in a society which is revolutionary. I mean, I learned the other day, I can't describe it because it would be giving away privacy. I learned today that some operations within the British Civil Service, which are so astonishing and insane in their nature that you would not believe that any civilized society would actually do them. But we are doing them. They're now official policy. And for a moment, my mind boggled. Well, of course, this is what happens. We are now living in such a society, and the biggest public exhibitions of this have been the great COVID panic, in which whole nations metaphorically burnt down their own houses to get rid of the wasp's nest, and the climate change frenzy in which large countries commit acts of tremendous self-harm on the basis of ideology. Turning away from looking at Germany. Germany has shut down its nuclear power generation. Yeah. And there is no defence of this as a national policy. It's completely unhinged. And Germany, for goodness sake, which is supposed to be well governed by educated people, but yet this is what they have done. And in our own country, you look at the destruction, particularly of the generation of electricity by coal, which has left us naked in the face of this huge climb in the price of gas. And the funniest thing about all this at the end of it is, of course, that gas is not a green fuel, though it's technically been declared one, apparently, by the European Union Politburo, because it's too embarrassing to admit that it's not. Yeah. And we have one huge power station in Drax, which is supposed to be serving the environment by burning trees. And you can't stand and look at this is as laughable. I remember Gorbachev making a speech quite early on in his time as head of the Soviet Communist Party, when he said that we have a completely ridiculous country in which farmers are feeding fresh loaves from the bakers to their pigs because it's cheaper than pig's milk, because of the bread subsidies. And there was this great story that was told, I think, by the leader of my Trotskyist outfit, Tony Cliff, in his book on Russia. It was a great struggle one year to fulfill the plan, the 5-year plan in the production of nails. And the great thing, though, was that the production of nails was not measured in the number of nails you produced, but in the tonnage of nails you produced. And so to meet the quotas, they reset the whole casting process of the nail factories to manufacture enormous nails, 10 and 15 feet long, and they made lots of those. And of course, in tonnage, they meant that they made enough tons of nails to fulfill the 5-year plan. They could never have made enough nails of a usable size. As soon as the 5-year plan was over, they had to melt them all down and make proper nails. But these are the sort of mad things which happen in ideological countries. And we are now living in such a society. Everything is done on the basis of dogma rather than on the basis of intelligent estimation of the circumstances and sensible planning. And it goes in all kinds of other ways as well. I mean, just look around and see the number of things which happen. And the National Health Service doesn't work, not because it doesn't have enough money spent on it, but because it's run in a crazy way.
Yeah, that seems to be a problem everywhere. It's just everything is run by.
And people will shrug in so many trades and professions. People will shrug and say, "Well, I have to do this." The rules say I have to do this. The rules say I can't do that. The rules say you can't go there, and they shrug because what they're doing is they're enforcing a dogma which they know in their heart of hearts is foolish, but dogma rules.
Which, going full circle, comes back in a nice way to the Abolition of Man.
I suppose so, but what Lewis was arguing for was a strengthened understanding and support for what I suppose its enemies would call Christian dogma.
Well,
but that was the thing about that, which made it unappealing to so many people. Well, this is what Christianity actually enjoins on its followers, is to reform themselves. The modern ideologies go around telling people to reform other people, tell other people what to do, change the outer world to suit us. The much tougher job of reforming ourselves is one which we turn away from.
Exactly. Well, brilliant. Well, Mr. Hitchens, I believe you have to get off now, but I think we'll leave it there. But yeah, thank you very much. It's been very, very interesting.
Thanks very much. Okay.
Cheers. Thank you.